What's up, guys? It's Casey Zogelman, aka the fourth Sanderson sister, coming at you with another Hocus Pocus theory. As you can see by the title of today's video, I am submitting for your approval an in-depth analysis that the Sanderson sisters were actually the protagonists of the story all along. Allow me to break it down for you, and maybe you will see what I see. So buckle up, because this is going to be crazy, and I can't wait to share it with you, and let's dive in. First of all, let's look at the definitions of the words protagonist and antagonist. Protagonist means the leading character or one of the major characters in a drama, movie, novel, or other fictional text. The most common misconception about the word protagonist is that it means this character is the hero. This is the good guy. This is the hero. This is the person you're supposed to root for. That is just untrue. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from an article on becomeawritertoday.com, and I'm going to, as always, I will link it in the description for you if you want to read more. In literature, the protagonist is the main character of the story. While usually the good guy, it is possible for a story to have a protagonist who is not morally good. In ancient Greek, the word actually means one who plays the first part, a definition that has nothing to do with the character of the character. So their personality, basically. The protagonist drives the action of the story. The story arc is usually in line with the protagonist's goals. This is important for later. The story may come from the protagonist's point of view. Protagonist simply means the main character or main characters of a story. In our case, it's the Sanderson sisters who are the main characters or protagonists, and we can all attest to this. We actively root for them to win. Now, let's look at antagonist. Antagonist means the character who fights against the protagonist. Simple as that. And again, a common misconception with the word antagonist is that they are the villain. That's not true either. Look at Norman Bates in Psycho. He is very clearly the villain, but he is the protagonist of the story. He is the main character. There are multiple types of antagonists as well, and they don't always have to be people. They can be inanimate forces to your run-of-the-mill, mustache-curling villain. The antagonistic force in Hocus Pocus, our protagonist's face, is called conflict creator. And that simply means this antagonist has a goal in conflict to the protagonist, but not necessarily an evil intent. However, because they want something different, the conflict creator works against the protagonist. Okay, now that we have all of that in mind, let's look at our characters of Hocus Pocus again. So as I did in the last section, I'll be referencing another article in this section as well, and I plan to link it below. Let's break this down from the very beginning of the movie. More often than not in a story, we meet the protagonist on page 1 in the first scene. Yes, of course. Who's the first character we see in Hocus Pocus? If you said Thackeray Binks, you are absolutely incorrect. The very first character we see is Sarah Sanderson as she flies over Salem. In this article from jamiegold.com, we read about a technique called anchoring that helps readers stay in the setting. We usually start with our protagonist as the point of view character because that gives the reader an avatar through which to experience the story. The POV character is the anchor perspective for the story experience. Starting with even the silhouette of Sarah grounds us in the reality that in this story it is about magic and witches. This is a story about magic and witches. This is a magical story. In this world, magic exists. And there are witches. That's that. Yes, Thackeray is the first to speak a line, but Sarah is who we see first. Showing the protagonist first is usually the default for writers as it sets the precedence for everything else in the story. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you see other characters and settings, like I would give it to Jafar in Aladdin as an example. We see Jafar first. That doesn't necessarily make him the protagonist. So it's not, you don't always have to start with the protagonist, but in this case, we do start with the protagonist. And like I said, they set the precedence for everything else in the story, including other characters and settings. Hocus Pocus, as we all know, is different from practically any other Disney story, and that rings true here too. The difference being that the main characters are the villains and not the good guys. Going back to the anchoring technique I spoke of a moment ago, in the first few pages of a book, or in our case, first scenes in a movie, we get a feel for the protagonist's personalities and traits. Do we really get to know Thackeray Binks in the beginning? Nope, we sure don't. Who do we get to know the most? The Sanderson Sisters. We know their personalities, we get a taste of each of their powers, we see them interact with each other, we really get to know them and their dynamic. We spend time with them. We spend time in their world, in their house, watching them, observing them, seeing what they're doing. That is where we spend most of our time in the beginning, is with the sisters. We cut away to Binks, yes, but most of the time in that first few scenes, we're spending time with the sisters. Thackeray is in the beginning of the story, but he is the beginning of the conflict-creating antagonistic force, so we get to know him later on, as we typically do with antagonists. The same is said for Max, Allison, and Danny. They are introduced second instead of first, as most antagonists are. We tend to spend some time with the antagonists in stories before we jump back to the heroes to really set up the conflict, or what they would say, heroes, the protagonists. The same formula can be applied to Hocus Pocus, as we spend a few scenes with the kids and learn about their motives, all the way up to bringing the Sanderson sisters back in. This is where we really begin to see the protagonist versus antagonist conflict start, but not in the way people are used to. Yes, on the surface, it's your typical good versus evil fight, but looking at it more in depth reveals that we've been studying this all wrong. We've been looking at it the completely wrong way. The main giveaway of this is that when we are presented with the main goals of the protagonists, it isn't the kids who lay out the plot, the goals, the stakes, and the best possible outcome should the antagonist be defeated. It's not the kids, it's Winifred. Now, if we look at Max's brief speech, which we will do down below, you hear the antagonist part really come out. The main goal of the 4 kids, or 3 kids and 1 cat, whatever you want to call it, it's to oppose the witches and defeat them to save their lives, ergo the conflict creator tool. Their goals oppose the witches' goals, but they aren't for nefarious purposes, but because they oppose the protagonists, that makes them the inherent antagonistic force. We will look at both of these clips, like I said, in the next section. Now we are going to look at the story beats that further prove my theory, and be warned, this section will be clip heavy, so there's about to be lots of cutaways. Lots of cutaways, my friends. The major plot points of a story often revolve around the protagonists. The exposition, or inciting incident, takes place at the very beginning, where the Sanderson sisters are hanged for stealing the life of Emily Binks when they curse the town.
Witches! Daughters of darkness! Open this door!
Hide the child!
Witches? There be no witches here, sir!
Don't get your neck out of a twist! We are just 3 kindly old spinster ladies!
Spending a quiet evening at home! Sucking the lives out of little children!
Fools! All of you! My ungodly book speaks to you. On All Hallows Eve, when the moon is around, a virgin will summon us from under the ground. We shall be back, and the lives of all the children shall be mine.
The inciting incident involves Thackeray, Emily, and the townsfolk, but it centers on the Sanderson sisters. The first meeting between protagonist and antagonist is often triggered by the antagonist. Max summons the Sanderson Sisters.
Max, no!
We're home.
The rising action is where we typically find out what both parties want and how they plan to reach their goals, but it, again, is typically the protagonists who explain it. Winifred delivers the rising action in her speech.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. The magic
That brought us back only works tonight on All Hallows Eve. When the sun comes up, we're dust. Toast. Pudding! Fortunately, the potion I brewed the night we were hanged would keep us alive and young forever. Unfortunately, the recipe for that potion is in my spellbook, and the little wretches have stolen it. Therefore, it stands to reason, does it not, sisters dear, that we must find the book, brew the potion, and suck the lives out of the children of Salem before sunrise. Otherwise, it's curtains. We evaporate. We cease to exist. Dost thou comprehend?
And Max follows it up with his own opposing goals.
Hey, look, I'm sorry, okay? We're talking about 3 ancient hags versus the 20th century. How bad can it be?
The stakes are set by both parties, but the more pressing of the two lay with the protagonists, as always. The Sanderson sisters have more to do and more to lose than the kids do. The rising action can last for a while, and it obviously includes brushes between the opposing parties.
It's just a bunch of hocus pocus! Brave little virgin who lit the candle. I'll be thy friend.
Come to mommy.
Afraid not!
Fatter and big, stout, mangy feline. Still alive?
And waiting for you!
The climax is typically where the antagonist gains the upper hand during a big move that disheartens the protagonists, and we move into the falling action. The climax of Hocus Pocus can be identified as the Sanderson sisters burning alive in the kiln at Jacob Bailey High School. The antagonists, the kids, gain the upper hand at this point in the story, and when the witches are found to not be dead, well, the girls are very disheartened because they don't have the upper hand right now.
Do you want to hit me? Does that cheer you up? Okay.
This is the end.
No.
I feel it.
Okay.
We are doomed. I feel the icy breath of death upon my neck. Mary,
What?
take me to the window.
Yes, Minnie.
I wish to say goodbye.
Yes, Minnie.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, cruel world.
Bye-bye, cruel world.
Goodbye to life.
Bye-bye, life.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye-bye.
Goodbye to all that.
All that.
The falling action often sees the protagonists searching for a solution to their problems, while the antagonists believe they've won for a while. In the case of this story, the Sanderson sisters seeing the beacon coming from Book is their solution to the problem, while Max and Allison still believe they've won.
Sister, observe.
They opened it! Just when our time was running out. Come, we fly!
The protagonists then confront the antagonists to show them they aren't out of the game yet.
Danny, wake up.
Trick or treat! Looking for this or this? We're down.
This, of course, leads into the last-ditch efforts on both sides to reach their goals, i.e., the sisters summoning the children and brewing the potion, while the kids plan to bamboozle them again. successfully. This, of course, brings us to the final fight that takes place just before the resolution. The Sanderson sisters confront the kids one last time in the graveyard. Now, this is where a lot of you would argue that my theory fails, because the resolution sees the witches dying in the end, and they lose. But once again, I say nay, nay. Look at the series Death Note. Light Yagami is our protagonist, but he is also our villain of the series. After fighting as hard as he did, spoiler alert, he still loses and dies in the end. So just because this happens... does not make the sisters any less of a protagonistic force. They did not reach their goals, but they are still the main characters of the story. Yes, the kids win in the end, but they are still in the conflict-creating antagonistic role. And this final piece of information puts the period on why the Sanderson sisters are actually the protagonists of Hocus Pocus. This story was originally told completely from the Sanderson sisters' POV, but Disney made the call to change that as they thought it would be too scary for children. Evidence of that is still left in the final film, sealing the deal on their protagonist status. Whew, I bet you guys were not expecting a lecture today. That awkward moment when you set out to write a YouTube script, but instead you write a college thesis. Holy moly. So what do you guys think of this theory? Does it make sense? Do you think they're the protagonists, or are the kids still the protagonists? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel, please remember to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't. It's free, it helps me, and what helps me helps you guys get more great content like this. I'm overjoyed to say that we have recently hit 700 subscribers on the channel, which means the world to me, and I'd love to see that number grow. In fact, I challenge all of you to hit 1,000 subscribers by the time Hocus Pocus 2 drops on, tentatively, October 1st. I'm still awaiting any news on a teaser trailer and release date. Really, Disney, you can give Avatar 2 a trailer. But we're still over here going, when's it coming out? When are we getting a trailer? Really? 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 It's driving me crazy. Next week I am going to do a mini news update because a couple articles have come out. But I've had other content planned, so I haven't gotten to that yet. So next week I'm going to do a mini news update and talk about some stuff that I think's going on due to a recent interview with Sarah Jessica Parker. So stay tuned for that. As of right now, I do not have an update on the VHS situation because the VCR we got, I'm still trying to get it to work. I was messing with it this morning and it tried to eat a tape and it wouldn't give it back, and I'm just kind of like, ah! So I had to manually get it out of there. The tape is unharmed, and it wasn't Hocus Pocus, so we're okay. But yeah, still trying to figure that out. I'll let you know as soon as I find out whether or not there are deleted scenes or something at the end of that tape. Right now, still waiting. Okay. Anyway, if you're a regular on this channel, please remember to drop a like and comment your thoughts on this topic down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Casey Zogelman, aka the 4th Sanderson sister, and I will see you witches and wizards later.
I am